live and play and grow in the Des Moines Metro. So the word is out. The partnership's done a great job with that. We're also being contacted pretty regularly by a variety of international partners from countries like Spain and France who are seeking to invest in Iowa, particularly in renewable energy. And a lot of this is with the goal of pushing Iowa expertise and products into Africa. So that's very exciting. Finally, at Shive Hattery, our mission is to design what matters to make the world a better place. And in particular, we design what matters to make Iowa a better place. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy today's discussion.
Thanks so much, Craig, and thanks to Shive Hattery for the work you all do and helping make our communities rich and vibrant places to work. So here's an overview of how the rest of today is going to work. Today is going to be interactive, and we're going to be moving pretty fast to make sure it's a nice, fun program for everybody. We're going to be providing both information from our speakers, our research partners, and a panel, along with some opportunities at the end to interact with fellow attendees from across the state. So what we're going to start off with today is a keynote with an interview with Kimberly Zarecor. We're going to get a sneak peek. We're delighted to welcome Wade Britt and Max Hoxie from Bâton Global, who are going to give us a preliminary look at some of the people and culture related results from our Envision Iowa Statewide Leaders Sentiment Survey. After hearing from Wade and Max, we're going to have a panel discussion with a great group from across the state, where we're going to talk about population growth. And then after that, we're going to head into a breakout session so you can meet people from across the state. I know sometimes not everybody's always excited to get and meet new people, so we'd encourage you to stay. We promise. We've done this in the past. 85% of the respondents said they made some great new connections in those breakouts, a great way to meet some people that otherwise you wouldn't have an opportunity to meet physically, just because we have the opportunity to be across the statewide reach here with today's event. Ultimately, what can you expect to get out of these think tanks? We hope that you get the opportunity to listen and hear to experts, hear some research, get to connect and share some ideas around some key themes. As a media company, we feel it's our role to help be the convener, to help make sure we're fostering these discussions and infusing them within our products so other people can engage with them as well. We've got a great group from across the state. And so if you would, in your name in the chat, if you've got an opportunity, we'd love to go ahead and you can use that chat function right now. We want to make sure that you've got that ability to do so. Go ahead and put in your name, where you're from, what you're excited for with this program as well. All right, let's go ahead and dive into our program. I'm really delighted to introduce Kimberly. She's the leader of the Rural Shrink Smart Project and professor of architecture in the College of Design at Iowa State University. The Rural Shrink Smart Projects is a NSF-funded project that explores small and shrinking rural communities in Iowa that have been able to protect quality of life and community services for the residents, even as they've lost population. Their goal is to develop tools to help small and shrinking communities actively plan for a shrinking population and how that affects their quality of life. Their work questions the whole framework of population growth and instead emphasizes the need for a mindset shift for communities to focus on quality of life and not just the quantity of people. That can be a bit provocative. The title of our event today, of course, is How Do We Help Iowa's Population Grow? And intentionally today, I wanted to bring her into the conversation to start us off, to give us just a little bit of a twist and a little bit of a counter way to think about population and as we think about people and culture and growing our communities. So Kim, why don't you go ahead and start us off and tell us a little bit about your research and about the program.
So hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm especially happy that Shive Hattery is sponsoring Go Architecture firms into this conversation. So I have been at Iowa State for 19 years. I am trained as an architectural historian. I teach also architectural design and research methods. And about 7 years ago, I got interested in the topic of shrinking rural communities in Iowa, which is something that all of us who live here see. Anytime you leave a place like Ames or West Des Moines or Waukee or Ankeny and you drive out a few minutes, you realize that the state looks very different away from the booming metros. And as a research question, I wasn't seeing a lot of people asking research questions about this. Like the group today, there's a lot of conversations about economic development and the desire that we have as a state to grow, and that there's so much energy in the business community for growth. But I think the important part of our project is that we are researchers. We're entering the question to try to better understand what we see around us. And we don't come with a predetermined position on the questions that we ask. And I find that a lot of people who are involved with research about rural communities come in with a perspective that the job of the research is to give people ideas for how to fix the problem of shrinking populations. And our research project is explicitly something else, which says there's no fix. Rural communities and most communities in Iowa will continue to lose population. And we take that as the starting point and a given, and we say that it's okay. We try to take a little bit of the shame out of that statement for communities and say that the goal is actually to really focus on keeping people happy, understanding what they love about their communities, using storytelling to really highlight all of the great ways that Iowa provides a quality of life that's not available in many other places anymore, and that's really the focus. And the number of people in a community is something that you're not really going to be able to control in most of Iowa. And this, as Chris mentioned, can be provocative for some people. And I think this audience is a great one to share some of our thoughts about this and what the research and the data tells us.
So I wonder, can you maybe provide a couple examples of the way your research has been tried to be applied in different communities?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk at a high level first. The question is, what do people think of when they think of quality of life? So the research tells us that people think about a lot of different qualities in their community: schools, local government, jobs, housing, medical services. There's actually 7 dimensions that the research says come together for people's perception of their quality of life. What we're trying to think about in communities is how can a community that's losing population, which, as I said, is the majority of communities in Iowa, how can they still see some positive effects from actions that they take, intentional decisions that a community can make that really focus on the dimensions of quality of life that matter to people? So how can you use the resources in your community to protect the quality of the schools and the infrastructure? And how can you have great community events? Because our research tells us that that's what's really going to help people think that they want to stay and really want to invest in a rural community or a shrinking community. I think some of the examples that we've seen in our communities that we've been working with are a lot of activities and events that they've sponsored that address a range of different population groups in a community. So not just stuff for young families, not just stuff from people who are retired, but actually trying to think about the community as a whole, as all of the people in the community, and thinking about ways to bring them to festivals, to do activities together, to create community spaces. And we see in communities that this has a big effect on people's perceptions of feeling that they belong in a community, that they're valued, that if they were to leave, people would miss them. It sounds like a really simple thing, but this is something that matters a lot to people. And the communities that we've seen who are successful at this, they have not seen population increase. I think this is a really important message of the project, is you can do everything right. You can take all the advice from consultants, from research, you can put these activities in place, you can do the investment. The population trend itself is not going to change in most places. It is a macroeconomic change. It's not in the control of individual communities. And we have to separate the two questions, quality of life from the population trend.
So talk a little bit about that. I imagine you've had some pushback to the idea of saying that it's a foregone conclusion that some of these communities aren't going to have the opportunity for population growth. How have you tried to address that? What's that been like as you've gone through that process?
I think one of the first things is just to encourage people to allow that message to sink in and to just think about it a little bit. If we take away the idea that there's some fault in this population loss, that a community has done something wrong, or they've made bad choices, or that they missed an opportunity and that's why the population is going down, our project says it's truly outside of your control. This is about the history of the state and agriculture in the 19th century, how the towns were settled in Iowa. There's simply not a mechanism to repopulate the almost 1,000 towns that we have in this state. And about 75% of them have fewer than 750 people. So if you can imagine, we're a state full of very small places. And so to imagine that there's a way that all of those places can consistently find new people, not just move people from place to place. This is something we talk to towns about, and once they kind of process this, that this really is a deep, persistent, long-term, not going to change pattern, I think it's a lot easier to just open the next part of the conversation, which is, what kind of community do you want to live in? How do you want to participate in making it a community where people feel welcome, valued, and that they belong? And what are actions you can take, no matter what the population is, to help other people in the community feel positive feelings about living there?
You talked about some of those actions that they can take to make the community valuable and rich and vibrant. So talk a little bit about, you talked about events. So there's some other ways that communities have really tried to focus.
Yeah, so I think a lot of you are probably familiar with the idea of weak ties. But if you're not, what we've found is that in rural communities and in small communities, weak ties are the thing that really help people belong. And a weak tie is someone who's outside of your friend or family group, but somebody you might see at the coffee shop, somebody who works in the grocery store, the guy who delivers your mail. The patterns of seeing people over and over again, smiling at them, saying hello, somebody at a restaurant knowing your favorite order. These are weak ties that we see are really important to people's perception of living in a small and shrinking town. And the towns that we work with, we see all kinds of evidence that people develop these kinds of relationships and that they matter a lot. And so I would just say that, when you're thinking in a community, we ask people in our workshops, what have you personally done in the last few days to make someone that you know in your community have that positive feeling? Have you smiled at somebody? Have you learned someone's name who maybe you didn't ask them before? Did you open the door for someone and say hi to them? We want to kind of cultivate this idea that it's an intentional act to participate in bringing this sense of belonging to the community. And we really try to emphasize that there's an emotional piece of this. People feel that they belong. There's not a kind of recipe, there's not instructions. It's really this bringing this positive attitude and mindset about the place.
Well, it's interesting because it's something that I think we talk about a lot in Iowa in general, and in larger cities too. Des Moines, people have struggled to put a data point behind that, but I absolutely know what you mean in terms of those weak ties. My father-in-law, he moved from Florida. He went to the doctor the first time and he asked how you're doing. And he started talking about his health, and the doctor said, no, I was just asking what your day, how's you think of it, right? And he was so used to having that exchange. And so that idea of the weak ties is a really interesting one, and probably one that can be extrapolated to other communities as well. You talked about the process of doing kind of the community workshop. What does that look like? And maybe if you have an example of a community you've worked with, that could be really helpful too.
So one of the communities that we love to talk about is Elma out in Howard County, out in Northeast Iowa, because this is the smallest of our towns that we've been working with. And when I say working with, what we've done is we've gone, visited, listened, learned, and then come back to Ames, to our kind of research context, and tried to take what we learned and turn it into knowledge that we can share out. So we go to communities that already know how to do this well, and we know this from what we see in the quality of life data that we have about them. And that's another part of the project. There's something called the Iowa Small Town Poll. So we only have learned from towns where we also have Iowa Small Town Poll data. So I think one of the things that we see is that there's individuals in the community who have taken it upon themselves, literally 1, 2, 3 people who have decided to lead others into this kind of community work. So it's not just a question of whether there's a good mindset about this in the community, but you have to have these individuals who step up and take the time. And so in Elma, they have a really wonderful small group of people who for maybe 10 years have really actively been trying to work on specific topics, fundraising, building community spaces. They brought a health clinic. They built relationships out to the Mennonite community that surrounds Elma, which has helped them to think about how to grow some businesses in town that could also attract people from outside in these Mennonite areas. And that's allowed them to have a more creative approach to what a 500-person town can do. And I think that one of the observations findings we have from all of our communities is that if you have these individuals who put a lot of time in, and often there's individuals who also put private financial resources in, so they support with philanthropy. Even in a little town, there's a lot of philanthropy happening to pay for a lot of the activities. There is a vulnerability in all of these communities. If you are a shrinking town, you really can be vulnerable if one or two people who have been leading the effort, they either pass away, they move, their family situation changes, their job changes, and they no longer have the time or the resources to put into the community. One of the activities or the actions that we see in communities is to actually mentor another generation of leaders all the way down into the younger people in town, so that if those people who've been doing the work need to step away or they are no longer there, you do have some people ready to go. Sometimes in communities, we have observed that there's a clique, a small group at the top, and they don't want to let new people into that kind of group of people that are leading. Better communities in terms of perceptions of quality of life have a more open structure. People who want to join are welcomed. They're given work to do. Their talents are showcased, and you see a much more kind of fluid set of people coming in and out for different activities. One of the great people that we met in one of our communities in a town called Bancroft, up in Kossuth County in northern Iowa, gave us this advice that I had never thought about, which is when she's recruiting volunteers for events, she only asks people to give an hour. So if a festival is happening all day, or you need to staff a booth to sell something for a few hours, you don't ask one person to stay for the whole time. You say, come for an hour, and that's it. I just need you for the hour. And that's a low threshold to enter into a volunteering role. And at the same time, you've also brought that person to your event, and they can enjoy the event for the times that they're not volunteering. And just thinking a little bit about that, the nuance of that, is really a kind of like, it's a genius that some people have. You know, we just discovered all these amazing people making small choices that have big effects in these towns.
There's a couple questions in the chat related to the idea of some areas that maybe have had some growth from a population standpoint. I'm curious. One was referencing maybe some success that Minnesota has had with growing their rural towns and comparing that, and then also I believe it was Sioux.
I saw that Sioux County.
Yeah, Sioux County as well. So just curious if you have any knowledge around that area, and then I'll have one last question for you after this.
Okay, great. I'm gonna answer all of this together because what we want to really stress is that we work with aggregate data. We are not saying there's not an exceptional example in which a community is able to grow. What we are saying is that overall, rural communities in Iowa and small towns in the upper Midwest are not going to grow if we look at a long-term population trend line. It's a fact. So individual exceptions are actually just about storytelling, and there may be a particular thing happening. Sometimes those communities are actually closer to a metro than what we look at. We look at rural communities that are at least 50 miles from a metro. So we're not looking at bedroom communities, and we're not looking at rural places that are near to a city. We're really trying to understand the true rural parts of a state. So the Minnesota question, I would counter a few ways. First of all, the politics of our states are very different. And there are going to be diversity of view among the people who are on the call today about the positives and the negatives of the two different positions of the state governments of a Republican administration or a Democratic one. But I would say that Minnesota's liberal policies, the data would say, attract more younger, more educated and more professional people into the metro areas of Minnesota. And that has the effect of bringing just a lot more people into the state, and they start to push out into those ex-urban areas. And there's a capacity to leave Minneapolis and go to a smaller community and staying in a state that you still feel maybe represents values that you have at a larger level that are more typical for people who live in an urban area. In Iowa, we have seen what we would call in our research, we've seen some choices made at the state level that have kept resources out of the hands of the leadership of small communities. So there has been choices made that centralize some of the resources of the state in the state capital and don't give small towns autonomy to make as many financial decisions about how they want to spend their money as they would like. And we hear this from every community we work with, that they feel more and more constrained and starved of financial resources through taxation and other policies. And this, in the long term, will have effect. Whether people agree with it or not, I do think that there is a difference in Minnesota on that topic in terms of how resources are shared.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. It's a complex topic. It's one that I thought your perspective of thinking through the lens of how, as communities are shifting, that there's multiple ways to think about thriving. It doesn't always have to be around growth specifically, even though there might be communities that are having some success with growth, and I'm sure people want to explore that. We're going to continue to explore that from both angles. And so, Kimberly, thank you so much for being here today. And
my pleasure. And I'm going to stick around and hang out in the breakouts. So I'll see some people there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'd like to now bring on Wade Britt. He's going to give us a little bit of a sneak peek at some sentiment data that will give us a little bit of a glimpse into the future. Wade is the managing director at Bâton Global, which is a leading strategy and research consulting firm that has an international presence and also offices right here in Des Moines. This is the third year we've done the statewide survey with Bâton, and the survey aims to provide data and trends to leaders to help them understand what other leaders across the state are thinking, where their opportunities and gaps are in terms of the economic outlook in the state now and also into the future. They're currently crunching the data to help prepare the full report that will be available in October at our main in-person event. But we've asked them to pull a few nuggets out of here and some early takeaways from their initial analysis. Wade, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today and to give you a little bit of a sneak peek on some of the findings as they relate to population, workforce, and quality of life. Let me just pull up some of the information here to share with you. Hopefully you're all looking at a dashboard at the moment. Whenever we talk about data and results, people always want to ask questions around, well, how did you get it and who was involved? So that's always a good place to start. The data that we're going to talk about today is coming from close to 600 responses that represent about 85 counties here in Iowa. We also segregate the data between sort of rural and urban to kind of understand any differences in experience across those populations. We're a little overweight with urban areas at about 76% response rate, whereas if we look at the state urban rate at 63, so I do just want to be a little upfront about areas where maybe the population that responded to our study might differ from aggregate macro data for Iowa. There's a nice little map down here where you can kind of see the dots, and the size of the bubble represents the number of respondents that came from a particular geography. We did manage to get a reasonably good spread across the state here. And then last but not least, on this right-hand side, these big blocks kind of indicate the size of the industry segment that responded to the study. So for example, nonprofit, government, banking and finance accounted for approximately 16% of respondents, and you can kind of see some of the other industry segments and how they break down there. So I will just pause for a moment to see, my ability to see the chat screen has kind of gone away. So Chris, maybe if there are any questions.
You're all good to move forward.
Wonderful. All righty. So we're going to cover a couple of items today, just in terms of sharing the information about what these close to 600 leaders across the state felt with regards to the sentiment of the climate here in Iowa across a variety of subjects. A lot of stuff up here, but what I want to do is I want to direct your attention to this particular graph up here. We're talking about sentiment towards population with the light blue tab representing pessimistic views, the dark blue being more of a neutral view, and the orange being more an optimistic view. And what we've done is we've put the results you'll see there's a 2023 and a 2022 here. What that basically means is in 2022, the sentiment for 2023 with regards to population was really characterized with a very high neutrality sentiment. In second place, a reasonable amount of optimism and a small amount of pessimism. Going over here, the 2023 results, you can see there's a pretty consistent majority of kind of neutral opinion, people not quite sure which way that's going to break. The latest results here in 2024 that look at sentiment on 2026, 2028, and 2030, you can kind of see that the neutral sentiment that was expressed in the previous year has broken a little bit bimodally, some of it going towards optimism and some of it going towards pessimism. But by and large, there's a slight bias towards an optimistic perspective on population growth over the next few years. When we look at sort of a split between these respondents as to whether or not people in urban locations or rural locations, you see a lot of congruence there. Right? There's not an enormous amount of difference between respondents, whether they were based in an urban or a rural location.
It's really interesting feedback. I like appreciate you taking the breakdown to show kind of that split. And one of the things that I'm sure we'll do then with our follow-up reporting is try to understand what's maybe leading to the fact that there's less people feeling in a neutral position and more breaking into one or two of the different camps. So what other findings perhaps have you come across so far?
Sure. I'll move over to workforce. We've got a slightly different picture here. Again, we're showing the view of the 2022 study, the 2023 study, and the 2024 study. Again, a lot of neutral sentiment in the previous year, but for 2024, sentiment towards the workforce appears to have broken a little more negative in terms of increased pessimism about the growth in workforce for 2026, 2028, and 2030. What is quite interesting to me in this data is that the rural respondents were markedly more optimistic. You know, if you look over here, it's sort of 15 and 19%, and compare that to a 27 and close to 30%. It's very interesting to see that neutral sentiment over the last year has shifted a little more negative on balance, but less so in rural areas.
Interesting. And I think you've got maybe one more to share. Is that right?
Indeed, I do. In terms of looking at the quality of life, a little bit of a similar trend towards workforce, but not as strongly pronounced towards pessimism. A little more of a bimodal distribution. If you look out here in the 2024 results, looking at it 2030, you've got 41% pessimism versus 38% optimism. So trending a little more pessimistic, but not as dramatic with the workforce data. And a similar trend in this split between urban and rural results, where we're seeing the rural results looking markedly more optimistic, 43.4% optimism being expressed stretching out to 2030. So I thought that was very interesting that rural respondents were more optimistic, both in terms of workforce and quality of life.
That's really interesting. I think my instinct would have been that would be flipped. And so that would be an interesting one for us to dig a little bit deeper into in the future. So Wade, I appreciate you taking the time to give us kind of a little bit of a snapshot. I know you all will be digging into the other factors of the survey. These are just three of the areas that we looked at as part of people and culture. And they're going to be digging in. They're going to help provide a few more of these as we go along the way, as we start looking at the different for the next two think tanks. And then, of course, we'll have the full report as well. I'm going to put a link in the chat here in just a moment, and it refers back to the report from last year. So you can take a look at that if you're interested in looking a little bit more into it. We're taking the survey each year. It's interesting to see the differences over the now in the third year that we're doing this, but it's also a lot of good findings from last year as well, that if you're feeling like you're wanting to dig into some data, trust me, there's plenty of it for you to dig into to learn a little bit more about. Thanks again, Wade. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move into our panel discussion. Our associate editor, Mike Mendenhall, is going to be helping lead that discussion for us today. Mike has been with us now for almost a year, and he's curated a great group of panelists from across the state. so that we can talk about some of the topics today, maybe some of the things that we heard from Kimberly, maybe some of the things we heard from Wade, but I know he's got some great questions to help us dive into this topic of population growth and people and culture. Mike, go ahead and take it away. We'll have this running for the next 25 to 30 minutes or so. So Mike, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're very excited to have a trio of panelists who strategize and act every day on our focus topic here today to help their communities grow and thrive through people and culture. So I'm delighted to introduce Karen Eischen. She's the Executive Director of Pella Area Community and Economic Alliance. She's led the organization and its predecessor, the Pella Chamber of Commerce, for nearly 2 decades. And she was previously the director of the Pella Convention and Visitors Bureau. Under her leadership, PACE has become a leader in fostering cooperative efforts and pioneering creative solutions to drive economic growth. Karen's dedicated to ensuring that her members receive exceptional support and opportunities for development. So Karen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We also have with us today Beth Nigut. She's the Executive Vice President of EMC Insurance. Beth is a member of EMC's strategic leadership team. She started with EMC in 2010 as a Vice President of Human Resources. Beth was promoted to Senior Vice President of Human Resources in 2014. She assumed her current role in 2020 and supports marketing, communications, IT, strategy, innovation, DEI, human resources. Prior to joining EMC, Beth served as the General Counsel for the Des Moines Independent Community School District. So Beth, glad to have you with us.
Excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And rounding out our panel today is Bruce Teague, Mayor of the City of Iowa City. He was elected to the City Council in 2018. In July of 2020, he was appointed to a 2-year term as mayor and is currently serving his 3rd term. Bruce has moved to Iowa from Chicago when he was 17 years old and graduated from Iowa City West High. He also has an associate's degree from Kirkwood Community College in applied science and nursing, and he's a 2001 graduate of the University of Iowa. Holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and a certificate in aging studies. For the past 20 years, he's also owned Caring Hands and More LLC, which serves seniors and individuals with disabilities. Mayor Teague's also very involved with, in the community with aging and disability services, LGBTQ issues, and small business support. So welcome, Mayor Teague.
Super excited to be here. Go Hawks and hello, Cyclones.
Like bringing it together. Enjoy that. So as you can see, we have a great mix of experts here today. So let's start by asking the full panel, what are the top priorities for your area or organization around people and culture, in particular around population retention? And Mayor Teague, let's start with you. Oh, Mayor, I believe you're muted.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
This is a great question because more than ever, people are mobile. And from an economic development standpoint, we have to shift from some of those historical thought processes because we can no longer focus on attracting employees. Rather, we have to really focus on building community that people want to live in. So quality of life really does become at the top of that desire for individuals. And so one of our #1 economic strategies is to ensure that where people live, that we have something where people want to live. Iowa City, one of our slogans is we are the greatest small city for the arts. And so we invest a lot of funds into nonprofits that are art organizations. We invest both in the operational component as well as from a capital standpoint as well. Some of the organizations here are Englert Film Scene and Riverside Theater. But we also have this great relationship with the University of Iowa, which is, that college is nestled right in the heart of our downtown, which I call the living room of our community. But we have great programs associated with that facility. Everybody knows, things about our great athletics, but there's other things that really do have people within our community bringing them great joy, and that is our Hancher Auditorium. We have the Stanley Art Museum, which has some great artifacts in there and is free to the public. Voxman School of Music. So these are just a few things, but when we're thinking about the great outdoors and some of the recreational things that people want in a city, and that is our parks and and the trails that we have. We have a single bike course that we just opened up this summer. We have a skate park, and there are so many other things that people really do love when there are natural areas for people to gather, bringing not only themselves but their neighbors together. And those are some of the things that I think people are really looking for when they're moving to a community and staying in a community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mayor. And Beth, I'd like to move on to you. What are the top priorities for you over at EMC around people and culture and focusing on that population retention and growth?
Sure. We've always got a lot that we're thinking about in terms of our talent, our people, our culture, and then also how that directly impacts our communities where our employees are living and working. So the top is just making sure that we've got the best talent, that we are recruiting, that we are developing and retaining at EMC to work in the jobs that we need. And we're very much aware of the demographics of the workforce and what that looks like from a perspective of the aging workforce or retiring workforce. And then, as we were hearing today, what does the population of the state of Iowa look like? And we, while we are a national carrier, we have roughly half of our workforce located here in the state of Iowa. So we really want to make sure that we have that talent pipeline that is at the ready and that is being developed. And part of that is really making sure that we have a culture of belonging. We want to make sure that our team members can see themselves here at EMC. And that also means that team members can see themselves in the communities where they are living and working. And so again, that goes back to that vital interconnection between the business and the community and what that looks like, and really making sure that we're working together. And part of this is all wrapped around EMC's brand. We recently amplified the brand. We've got a new logo and a new tagline, but our brand is much more than a logo and a tagline. Our tagline is keeping insurance human, and we take that to heart. And so when we think again about our people and our culture and how we can live that brand of keeping insurance human, what does that look like? And living out that mission for our clients, for our agents, for our policyholders, for our team members. And when team members join EMC, we want them to know that they are a part of something that is bigger than any one person. It's part of that mission and vision to improve lives. And again, that connects with the communities and really just making sure that we are a good community partner, a good state partner, so that together we can really accomplish these goals of making sure that we have people who are living, working, thriving in our communities and in our businesses. It makes a stronger community and a stronger state.
Great. And Karen, same question to you. Top priorities for Pella and economic development in your area around population retention and growth?
Absolutely. For us, it's really twofold. One, integration, and the second, a balance of amenities. And Beth and Mayor both alluded to that, but I'll give you a couple of examples. Around integration, our office has a Hello Pella program. And this really works with our local employers as part of the candidate's interview, for example. They bring them in, and as a part of their day here, we give them a 45-minute tour of the community. We want them to have a great look at what Pella is. We talk about life here, all the different amenities, services they may need. And we also talk about the area and recreation. We ask them simply what their hobbies are. What can we translate from where they are to what we have here? So that's one. We have a volunteer database sign up that we're working on. We know when people integrate themselves into the community, they give up their time, they find things that they love to do, to volunteer, they're satisfied, they're more likely to stay. That's stickiness. We also do things such as follow our new residents and our business members with a weekly calendar event sent straight to their inbox. We want them to know what's going on in the community, when registration deadlines are, all of those things that you may not know coming into a community, but you have questions on. So that's just a little bit around that one. Balance on amenities, extremely important. We work with our employers to have focus groups of their employees. We want to know, what do they want to see here? What are they missing? What do they leave our community for? We always give them a caveat. We can't always deliver every single thing they want, but it definitely gives us a direction of what we can bring in. And then one of the other things that we have done to retain employees, we all know that telecommuting, work from home is very important. So our city invested in its own fiber utility that is now up and running. So every home in our community has the capability of gig fiber. So it makes it very easy to live and work in our community, whether you go into an office or not, or your employer is, across the world. They can do it from here. So those are kind of two main priorities that we are working on.
Karen, you started alluding to what I was moving into next. So I want to stick with you here. Communities, communities that the community you serve has existing amenities, institutions, and cultural events that are often positioned to aid in population retention and growth. This also kind of plays into what Kimberly was talking about earlier. We're largely talking about growth and expansion today, but how are you trying to leverage what you already have in Pella to retain and to retain population and maybe draw some more folks to your county?
Right. One of the strategies we are using is to really look at who is already in our community. We have a large number of citizens who leave our community and our county for work elsewhere. So we want to make sure we're giving them every opportunity. But even before they enter the workforce, we are trying to really make them aware of what opportunities are here, what careers are here for them. Maybe it's a great stepping stone to another career, but at least giving them the opportunity. We have Central College right here in our back door in our community. We work with them extremely close to integrate students into the community. There is a new Imagine More campaign that is currently running, and it is geared towards simply life on campus to integrate. So living off campus, dining off campus with your tuition dollars, everything to bringing businesses onto the campus in refurbished buildings so students can take an opportunity there. And even before they get to secondary, we have a program called Work Smart Connector. That is a program that's work-based learning. So working with high school students who may not want to go to a 2-year or 4-year or aren't ready to do that yet, to get experience, certifications, or apprenticeships into our local employers in their fields of interest. With that program, not only working with high school students, but we are now entering the classrooms as early as kindergarten with some of our employer representatives, just to really give them awareness of what opportunities are, help guide them in maybe what their interests are and how they align up with careers that could be here in the future for them.
Mayor Teague, throwing that question to you, Iowa City and the Iowa City area clearly has experienced a lot of growth in recent years, but how are you and the other community leaders in Iowa City leveraging those existing amenities and institutions to help with the population retention and growth?
One thing we learned during COVID is sustainability for businesses is crucial. And so with that, we have really focused in on existing programs that are already doing some things in the great outdoors as well as within facilities themselves. So we've been putting a lot of money into supporting those efforts and actually helping to boost those up. But When we think about cultural events, that is something that we have become more aware of and have done greater investments. So historically, we've always uh, gave contributions and beyond just money, but been a part of the Pride festivals that happen in our community, Juneteenth festivals, along with some other things that's happening. But more and more, we are seeing more diverse communities coming forth, and we're invested in them, like the Native Americans, as well as the Latino community. And they have some great celebrations. We often travel, out of the country to some of these places. But when you have groups of people within the community, they will love to share some of their traditions. And I love going to them. So I recently went to, the Chinese Association and some of the events that they had, as well as our Indian community. And I just left the Sudanese community event this last weekend. Some great things that are happening. And so I think making sure that we are giving some startup money. Now, we're not providing all the funds for these events in most instances, but we are giving some startup money to make sure that people have some connections that they really feel good about, whether they are part of that community or not, but just coming to show some neighborly support. So these partnerships, they give exposure and within the community, as well as some, operational support through not only the city efforts, but also from the public as well.
Beth, you might have a different strategy here. You might have a different as a working for EMC. How is your organization utilizing the existing amenities and institutions in the communities that you're based in, maybe from a workforce development or standpoint, or workforce retention or attraction?
Well, I think the beauty of conversations like this really highlight that, again, that connection and the necessary symbiotic connection between public and private, as well as nonprofit. You can't take a look at, I think, any of these things in isolation when we're really looking at how do we proactively think about growing and retaining a population. And so EMC is a part of this holistic equation. And so to echo on, both what Mayor Teague and Karen have indicated, how do we highlight that? So as a business, providing volunteer VTO opportunities to our team members as a benefit that not only is a nice to have, but we really want them to use that. And then you can use that in ways of fostering team camaraderie, to get out there, experience what we have going on from a cultural perspective by volunteering in these different events and highlighting that and not just giving it lip service, but really encouraging, your team members to take advantage of it. And how do we model that? And so leaders throughout the organization, really encouraging that ability to give back to our communities. So that's certainly one way. And then when we think about it from a standpoint of even within the industry, so the financial services industry within the state of Iowa, within Des Moines, we participate in what's called Insure Your Future. And that is a internship program that is across the state, started by the Iowa Insurance Division, the Iowa Economic or Iowa IDED, and then insurance companies, financial services sector in Des Moines, in Cedar Rapids, in the Quad Cities, partnering, with our public entities as well as our schools. And so our state schools, our private schools, making sure that we reserve some of these internship spots for this program, and then demonstrating the value of insurance and our financial services, really enticing students in college. And the nice thing about this internship is it's not necessarily for juniors or seniors. We're really looking at even those freshmen and sophomores in these colleges and universities, getting them excited about careers in the industry that is highly has a high presence in Des Moines and in the state of Iowa, and then encouraging them to come back for a second year. And then that word of mouth and, and making sure that they see that our communities, our state, are great places that you can put down your roots and grow. So that's a great example of an internship. We also go deeper with our internships and looking at high schools within Des Moines, and how can we reach out to maybe some underserved populations, getting every area to see that you can see yourself in insurance, and it's a great profession to learn and grow in. And then certainly just making sure that we're looking at those deep ties to our community partnerships, whether it is the Greater Des Moines Partnership, looking at opportunities for leadership development with Lead Des Moines, ABI, really capturing that kind of wide variety that's available to our to our organizations, just by really making sure that we're tapping in, and again going back to being that good business partner in the community and in the state.
Okay. Gonna kind of tie in two different questions here. One, I guess let's start with Beth. What would you say are some of the biggest barriers around people and culture, and what can we do about those issues when you're talking about growth and population?
I think it's important to keep the focus on the fact that it is vital that we demonstrate our state, our communities, our businesses are authentically welcoming. We really need to make sure that we keep our eye on that focus. So when we talk about having a culture of belonging within the walls of EMC as an organization, and I know both Mayor Teague and Karen spoke to this as well, but I really do think that is a very important part. And we see that in terms of when we're out there recruiting and trying to recruit, whether it's fresh out of high school or a pathway from college, or somebody looking to make a career change, into any of our positions. They want to come to a community and a business where they know that they belong. And this was talked about even in the very beginning segment with some of those weak ties. When you see somebody at the coffee shop, when you're on a Zoom call, really, how do we make sure that we are fostering that authentic sense of belonging in every facet of work and of life? Because when we do that, there is that psychological safety, that people are going to want to stay and really be developed within that community, within that business. And so we do see that as a vital role in making sure that we keep that conversation and that focus. The other thing I would say is just to make sure we're keeping the focus on the livability, sustainability of our communities, and then our organizations benefit from that. And here in Des Moines, it's things like the Icon Water Trails, the Easter Lake North Shore Project, our skate park, what's going on in Iowa City, what's going on in a lot of our places to really highlight that livability. And I also do think that broadband need in terms of the state, at EMC, we allow remote work. And so you can work at EMC and live in all corners of the state of Iowa. And we would allow for that remote type of engagement. But we need to make sure that there's that capacity from that broadband perspective, that to allow to connect us all together. So I'd say those are some of the key things that we'd highlight, is that need to keep working toward.
We have some people chiming in the chat, referencing barriers, including reaching marginalized population, as well as parents and students with reaching high quality education. So Mayor Teague, I want to pose that question to you. Also, considering some of those topics being brought up in the chat, what are some of the barriers that you're seeing, from a city government standpoint down there in Iowa City, surrounding people and culture, and what kind of strategies do you have to address those?
Yeah, so we see various barriers. One is affordable housing. So we have a supply, we need more supply, and of all types of housing, from the $1 million homes down to, the affordable apartments that people can see themselves being able to afford within our community. So that is one of the biggest barriers. In addition, there's property tax reform happening at the state government, which does affect us, and it specifically affects our arts and culture because we're, needing to, put money towards our core services like the police, fire, inspections, and all that other stuff. And so it is really having negative consequences on the other quality of life things that are happening in our community. The good thing is, some of those hopeful things that are happening is we have two SMIDs within our community, self-supported municipal improvement districts that self-tax them, businesses within that area that does support and come alongside the city to help bolster some of the arts and cultural activities that are happening, which is great. We have also our Chamber of Commerce, Greater Iowa City Inc. is what we call them, as well as Think Iowa City, and some of the arts that really do get behind and alongside the city to ensure that we can still provide some great opportunities within the community. But of course, those come with dollar amounts. But I think those partnerships are really helpful, and that's what we're using as that sweet spot in order for us to really enhance some of those experiences. We have one new SMID that has really recently come, and that's our South District, and they're doing some great things over there. There really is mainly focused on that part of town, but there's a lot of individuals that are minorities that are also over there that we've had to do some investments in that we're very proud of. But the challenges of the tax reform happening in our community, the houses, is a reality. And so those partnerships that we have with other entities and communities and is really helping us to advance. And so that has been our saving grace.
We have about 3 minutes left, but Karen, I'm going to pose the same question to you on barriers that that you're experiencing down in the Pella area and how you address them, and then we'll have about 30 seconds each for a final wrap-up question. So Karen, if you go ahead and talk about what you're experiencing down there and how you're addressing them.
Sure. I don't think we're experiencing anything different than any other corner of the state, quite honestly. When we look at people coming in from outside of the state or outside of our region, I think one of the barriers is just changing the perception that it's purely flat cornfields and there is nothing here. When they actually do come in for an interview into the area, my experience when I'm visiting with them is they are absolutely amazed what Iowa is like. It is nothing like the perception they had. So I think telling our stories, continuing that, highlighting all of the projects that are throughout the state, whether they're recreational or arts, is going to be key. I think when we're looking at our internal audience, our children in schools, one of the things we find through our Work Smart program is when we do go into the classroom, many of the students might know an employer is here. And Beth, you might experience this in the insurance business. Students don't know what careers are available in those particular lanes. Healthcare, for instance, they think you need to be a doctor or nurse. They have absolutely no idea that there are, computer techs, there are accountants, there's marketing, there's HR. They have absolutely no idea. Unless they see it on their phone, on social media, they might recognize the name, but they have no idea what goes on inside those four walls. So I truly think exposure to that, and that's what we're trying to address when we invite companies into the classroom, is to really just let them know what is available here, that they don't have to go to major metros all around the country to have the exact same careers.
Great. So just got time for one more question for about 15 to 20 second answers for each of you good guys. Thank you so much for your elaborate and very well thought out answers today. So what are some of the stories or ideas that you want to be highlighting to further Iowa and in the areas of population and culture? Mayor Teague, let's start with you, and 15 or 20 seconds.
Yeah, there are great programs happening at the state level that really do support local governments, Reap for Parks in Destination Iowa. Those are great things, but I have to say that we need some greater support for quality of life things, and I would encourage our state to really look at that opportunity for communities.
Great, thank you. Beth?
I'm going to deeper collaboration and understanding so that there's a complete understanding of that entire life cycle and system, because I was reading some of the comments in the chats, and it's absolutely true from a standpoint of whether it's affordable housing, education, accessibility to healthcare. All of that does connect, and it does connect in terms of the pipeline of talent for our organizations. And so it's in the rising tide raises all ships, and that could not be more true in a standpoint of the connections between the businesses, the private sector, nonprofit, government, all of us working together.
Great. And Karen?
And I apologize if you can hear the concrete work that just started outside my window, of course. I really think just telling stories of all the great things we have here, recreation and arts just transcends all of the generations. And we have so much of it here that I think that is a story we can be very, very proud of, and we need to tell more of.
Great. Thank you to all three of our panelists today. I really appreciate your insights and for spending a good 30 minutes with us. And I'm going to kick it back to Chris.
Thanks, Mike, and great job, panelists and Mike, on setting up a great panel for us today. There's a lot to chew on and think about, and we hope that you'll stay around here because we've got a little bit of time now to go into some breakout rooms. So here's how this is going to work. We're going to go into our first breakout session, our only breakout session today. And in there, you're going to join some of our staff members along with some of your fellow participants. What we're going to do is we've got one question. And essentially what that is what information did you hear today that resonated with you and why? You might have some time for some additional questions, and if that happens, we'll put some extra questions into the chat as well to be able to communicate to you. What we're going to do is our team will help start off the conversation and call on somebody in that group to go ahead and start the program. All you need to do is say your name, where you're from, and your title, and then give your answer. And so that'll be the approach that we take for this. We hope you stick around for this. We hope you share some of your challenges and some of the things that you're seeing as well. After the breakout session, we'll come on back. We'll do a few closing thoughts and we'll move there. So if you'd stick with me for 1 second, we're going to do a little bit of back end work here and get everybody into their breakout room. Sit tight for 1 second. welcome to those of you that are coming back. We're waiting for the rooms to close. They'll all come back in about 15 seconds. So sit tight. We'll wrap things up here in just a minute. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the opportunity to meet with some folks from across the state. Thanks for taking the time to do that and be a part of the group and to digest some of the things that we talked about today. The topic today is such an important one. One of the reasons we start the series with this topic is the idea of people and culture. That's infused into all the topics. When we start talking about business opportunities or infrastructure, this part of what we're talking about is infused underneath each of those, and it has layers all throughout the course of Envision Iowa. It's a key part of the focus for us and how we're continuing to try to cover economic development. And I hope that you learned a few things today, maybe took away a few new ways to think about population growth or how to shrink smartly in a possible way as well. And that could be applied to you and your communities and also to your businesses. Before we go, I want to highlight a couple quick things. We have a more than a 40-year history now at BPC, and we've got more than 48 publications. And as a participant in the think tanks, if you're not already a subscriber, we'll be reaching out just to make sure that you've got an opportunity for a special offer to become a member of the Business Record or receive DSM magazine. So well, be on the lookout for that. Of course, if you found out about this, you likely subscribe to our e-newsletters. If not, please feel free to sign up for those free e-newsletters at businessrecord.com/sign up. You'll, of course, be in communication here as we go through the series. We hope you come back for the next think tank as well. Our next one will be on August 22nd. It'll be at the same time. We're going to be talking about business opportunities. We're working on putting together a great program for you for that to really zero in on that topic as well. A big thank you to Kimberly for helping kick us off today and her work on the Rural Shrink Smart project. A big thank you to our panelists, to Bâton Global for the sneak peek, to the BPC team for helping facilitate and all the hard work putting on an event like this to help make it a great, successful event, and to, of course, Connie and Susanna for helping promote the state of Iowa, but also help stand up something like this that helps us continue working on making this a great place to live, work, and of course do business. And so lastly, thank you to Shive Hattery, today's sponsor, our visionary sponsors, for supporting this initiative as well. And thank you, of course, to you all for spending the time with us this afternoon. The fact that you're spending the time, we know you have a lot of places you can be and could be spending your time, especially on a nice summer day today. We appreciate that you spent it with us, learning a little bit about economic development and the future of the state. We look forward to seeing you all on August 22nd. Until then, if you need anything from us, feel free to reach out our way. We're always here to help you and your business do better. Thank you.